Something to give you.
Okay, counting down, everything looks good. Okay, I'll handle the meeting off to you, Mr. Colwell. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. This is a unique experience. We're juggling Zoom meetings here, but I'd like to welcome all of you to the special board meeting of August 6th. This is an electronic meeting done in accordance with the executive order from our governor. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I would request at this time we do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm glad you didn't take a knee. No way. You punch me. If I ever did that, you
Thank you, everyone.
could roundhouse kick me. With that.
I would like to do roll call. Mr. Clerk, can you do roll call, please?
Mr. Colwell?
Sure.
Mr. Lilly's here. Mr. Treasurer? Mr. Roman?
Here.
Paul?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
here.
Andrea Voorhees?
She's on mute.
Andrea?
Present.
Scott Ruggles? Here, Scott's absent.
Okay, thank you for the roll call, sir. I'm looking for an approval of the agenda, but I would like to make one item change, Mr. Clerk, that we're going to drop item D, and then we are going to add item G, which is just an FYI about an emergency expenditure at the fire department, which I will enlighten everybody about that happened this morning. So I'll fill everybody in on that. Mr. Clerk?
Motion to approve the agenda is stated, Rick.
I have a motion. I'm looking for support. Support by Mr. Roman. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Colwell?
Yeah.
Liz Smith? Paul?
Here.
Yes.
Scott Ruggles is absent. Andrea Voorhees?
Yes.
Yes, one absent.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, public comment. Public comment is typically for items that are not on the agenda. We are going to have some items that are going to be on the agenda this evening that persons that are online will have an opportunity to speak about those at that time. If anyone has anything, though, that they would like to say at this time, the raise your hand icon, Ken, that's *9, correct?
That's correct.
Will alert, and we will give you 3 minutes to state your case, but you will have to give your name and address for the record. Mr. Milburn?
Yeah, again, to the, there is a caller on the line. If you'd like to speak, please press *9 on your keypad, and we will be alerted that you'd like to speak, and we will unmute your line. Seeing no virtual hands raised at this time, Mr. Colwell?
I see no lines. At this moment, I will close public comment. Move on to item 6. Item 6 is an executive closed session, which we will go into, and I'm looking for approval to recess into closed session to consider attorney-client privileges communication in accordance with MCL 15.268H. That was in the form of a motion, looking for support.
Support.
I have support by Liz Smith. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Colwell?
Yes.
Mike Roman? Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Liz Smith?
Yes.
Mike Powell?
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees?
Andrea's
Unmute.
muted.
We have Andrea.
Yes.
Scott Ruggles is absent.
Okay, motion carries. I would ask everyone time to try as carefully as you can to, and skillfully as you can to try to get into the executive session.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
And you will mute all of the microphones and cameras. Thank you.
lead meeting.
Yes.
So are they going in there now?
Nick Spencer, if you could, please unmute your audio and turn your video on. We'd like to get a confirmation of your feeds.
He's here.
Awesome, thank you. We're in closed session right now, as you can see, but I figured I'd take advantage of this opportunity and just confirm your feeds. I see that you just joined us, so thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry. I had called in because I wasn't, I was on the road.
Yeah, no
So I didn't think
worries.
it was safe to zoom in during that time. So
Yeah. Okay, we're going to turn off your feeds and we're going to go, I'm going to throw the slide back up again and wait for them to return.
very good.
Thank you.
Are you there? Are you there, Mr. Ken?
I am here.
Okay, we're coming back into open session.
Awesome.
Wait till everyone gets here. We'll give it a minute or two.
Thank you for your patience, Ken.
No worries. Where am I getting that from?
Andrea is here, but I can't start my video because it says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
We're gonna get you right now, Andrea.
Okay. Just want to make sure I wasn't going crazy.
Well, you're going crazy, but that's not why.
Thanks, Mike.
We got Mr. Trustee Sean O'Neill online too. Gee whiz.
I've just been waiting for you guys. Eagerly waiting for your arrival, your return.
Who's missing?
Mike Roman is coming in right now.
We lost Aaron again.
What flavor is that, Mike Lufkin? Your sample.
Peach.
Oh, that's a
Peach
good
tea.
choice. Good choice.
Okay, I'll remind everyone we are live.
Still looking for Aaron Potter.
We've lost Mr. Potter.
Hi, Mike. Can you see and hear us okay? Yeah, you're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Liz, can you see and hear us okay?
I can, thank you.
Thank you. Still waiting on, there's Mr. Potter. We'll let him in now. Hi, Mr. Potter. Can you see and hear us okay? You're muted. Go ahead and unmute, Mr. Potter.
All righty.
There we go. Is this our full complement, Mr. Kowal?
I believe it is. I believe we have 6 board members present. And I guess.
Okay, well, let me know if you need anything.
Okay, very good. Moving on to item 7, new business. 7A, consider amendment to sewer ordinance chapter 38, article 4, section 38-418.
Do we have to formally restart the meeting?
No, we closed out. We exited.
Rick, those minutes are not part of our normal board, and Mike is correct. Need to open back into general session.
So I make a motion to open the general meeting.
Support.
We have motion, we have support. Roll call vote.
Mr. Kowal,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman,
Yeah.
Liz Smith,
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees,
Yes.
Mr. Paul,
Yes.
and I believe Mr. Ruggles is still absent.
Very good. Okay. Item 7A, new business. Consider amendment to the sewer ordinance chapter 38, article 4, section 38-418. I am going to defer to council for this for the moment. Counselor, you're on mute.
So we have had discussions over the last, well, forever, about amending the sewer ordinance definition of available public sanitary sewer system. But at the last meeting, Mr. Potter brought to the board a request that you consider amending the ordinance to be consistent with state law. So the amendment in front of you does just that. It is, it literally tracks the definition of the public health code with the township ordinance. As you might recall, the differences were the township ordinance requires measurement from the property line, the 200 feet from the property line, whereas the state public health code requires it to a structure.
Thank you. I will at this time look for Mr. Potter to kind of give us a little briefing on some of the things that we're talking about. Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Potter?
Yeah, I would. So Lisa is correct. We had two ordinances that I'm looking to amend, 38-418 under definitions of available public sanitary sewer. And then under section 38-514, property is connected to the sanitary sewer system. Sewer system does not extend the full width of the owner's property or shall be responsible for extending the sanitary sewer system at the owner's cost across the entire width of such owner's property so as to allow for future extension of the sewer system to adjoin the property. Sorry, I had to take a breath there. Sentence. Sentence 2 is what specifically I would like to amend. In the event of a corner lot, the property owner shall be responsible for extending the sewer along both width and length of the property along both roads in which the property is located. So I had a couple examples, and just due to technical difficulties in the trouble that I'm dealing with my laptop here, I'm going to avoid trying to go to screenshots of our GIS. One example was off of the street off of Elizabeth Lake Road that had sanitary sewer along Elizabeth Lake Road, and we did not have sanitary sewer down this adjacent street. There's no structure, there was no extension. I would like to amend our code to kind of clearly define the interpretation of the right-of-way as defining them as separate but connecting right-of-way. The way this ordinance is written, and even the way the state ordinance is written, has allowed a lot of interpretation on this subject. Now, we did look at some past case law. I asked Lisa to discover some, look for some precedents that's been out there. And the only precedents that we could find was the interpretation of our county sanitarian. And so I feel like it's an important issue for these homeowners. I did ask the board to make this clear. We do have a few issues currently that the board is working on that are directly impacted by this, but I feel like this is a big enough issue that it warrants us to clearly define this in our code. No matter who is on the board or who is on, in my position, engineer, our residents deserve to kind of know how to understand this ordinance. So I'm asking the board to approve me to work directly with the township attorney to amend ordinance section 38-14 to include a clearly defined interpretation of right-of-way, defining them as separate but connecting rights-of-way, and adopt the 200-foot rule as designed by MCL as defined by MCL 333.1271751. Excuse me. 3.12751. This would allow us to have more control of expansion of the system in a fair manner, rather than forcing the issue of sewer expansion into areas that may necessarily not belong. Also allow us to use our limited resources, financial resources, focus sewer extension in areas that are economic or ecologically sensitive, or in areas of development, ways that warrant sewer systems, rather than having this one vague definition kind of drive and force people to extend sewers into areas where it may not be the best use of our resources.
Very good. Are you good? Is that good, Mr. Potter? You good? for the moment?
That was part one.
Okay.
Lisa, did you want me to go into both of these at once now, or did you want to have some discussion in between?
Yeah, so right now we're on the item of the sewer ordinance amendment. So it sounds like the ordinance amendment that I presented and is on the agenda is not what you're recommending. You want to make some more tweaks to that definition before the township board consider it. Am I correct?
Yes.
Leave that up to the board, but I think that's the,
But that's what you're recommending.
that is what I'm recommending.
Okay, so then the second part of that is your recommendation that the township board strike the second sentence in the corner lot section.
Correct.
And those are your two recommendations sitting here today.
Yes, the, under 38.514 second sentence requiring extension on length and width. I think that's unfair to residents. Mike, you know, through our discussions, it is unfair. They do not benefit twice. And, you know, even in areas in SAD expansion, those properties are not included. And so I would like to strike that sentence. I feel like it unfairly penalizes folks that live on the corner lots.
Correct, Aaron?
That cover it, Lisa, you think?
Yeah, I mean, those are two now recommendations for the board to consider amendments. And we would, basically, you would be asking them to direct us to prepare the amendments to bring it back to them at their next meeting.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions from the board at this time? Liz Smith, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Supervisor. So I would like to see our board move these two amendments forward this evening so that we're able to serve our residents that are in need right now. And then again, I'd be requesting formally a workshop so that we can really dive into this ordinance and correct it properly once and for all. So that would be my request.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Roman, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, give me one sec. So I just want the board to know where I stand on some of these sewer thoughts. I totally support the idea of possibly rewording this section, in particular where it talks of right-of-ways, easements, highways, streets, or public ways, and how those adjoin or abut or cross the lots. If we can make that more clear, I'm all in favor. As far as the 200-foot rule, White Lake's 200-foot rule has always been that you measure from the sanitary sewer system to the property line, as opposed to what Mr. Potter is recommending, which would be from the sanitary sewer to the actual home or structure. The way we have it written now is what I support. It is more restrictive, and that's why I like it. Sewers keep our township clean. I'm concerned that future SADs will allow homes to get out of having to hook up, depending on where those homes are located. I'm concerned that new builds will be purposely built further back on lots to avoid having to hook up sewers. And our whole idea in this township is to get as many people as we can onto the sewer system. I totally agree with Mr. Potter on the corner lots. I agree that striking that sentence makes a whole lot of sense. That way you avoid homeowners having to put sewers on two sides of their property where they're only going to get a benefit on one side. And Lisa and Aaron, if you can just make sure that striking that one sentence does what we want it to do and doesn't open up any more cans of worms. We need to be careful. That's all I had, Rick.
Very good. Mr. Powell.
I'm certainly gonna echo my agreement with Treasurer Roman. I think we need to redefine the interpretation of the right-of-way. The current ordinance, I think it's fairly clear in that it states that it's the right-of-way that the sewer's in, but I think that it can be tweaked to be able to be interpreted or defined a little more explicitly, so there's no interpretation. I'm in total agreement with his concern about changing the 200-foot rule. It's really worked very well for White Lake Township, and it's really meant to promote the extension of the sewer faster than it would be if we defined it to the structure. We have a number of narrow but deep lots, and even with a sewer in the street, we have homes that are over 200 feet back on the lot, and it would preempt them from being required to tie into the sanitary sewer, even if their septic system failed. And I have a concern with that. And at the very least, if we didn't change it now, I think this subcommittee needs to discuss the pros and cons of that more. And I think that we can define that a little bit more so we can even present it to the rest of the board in a clearer way. So I'd like not to have that removed. I would be in favor of not removing that. And then I had a question for Mr. Potter on the removal of the corner lot issue. And what would happen if you had a corner lot that was 50 foot wide on one side and 300 foot on the other side? What side of the lot do you think the sanitary, what side of the lot do you think the homeowner or commercial venture would extend the sewer on? Obviously the 50-foot side. And so does it make sense, instead of eliminating that totally, to at least tie it to the master plan, so they must extend it down the side of the lot that the master plan calls for?
Yeah, Mike, we always look at the master plan right off the bat when we're looking at sewer design. But, you know, in a lot of cases, the location of the available main, you know, they're not always located on both streets. So most of the time when we're extending this main, we're extending it off of one that already previously exists. And that usually dictates how we build, you know, to supply somebody that's extending and connecting.
Okay. I see that. Thank you.
Any other board members at this time? Mr. Lilly.
Just again, want to go on record as supporting Mike Powell's comments regarding his comments that he had with the board.
Liz Smith.
Do we have any residents that would like to speak at this time?
Well, we can let some people chime in. The only thing is, what I want to make sure is that the folks that do chime in, we're interested to hear. I guess we could hear if they have an input or a thought on this. We do have one homeowner, this other persons eventually that could be affected by this, but we're taking action to try to remedy this. And essentially, by taking this action, this will be beneficial. So you may not necessarily need to get into the woods on any current situation, but we're more than happy to hear what the public has to say. So any other board members at this time? Okay.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Hey, Rick. It might not be a bad idea to maybe explain a little bit more on what the discussion about the corner lot issue is for the benefit of the public.
Well, I can do that. I would like to make sure that people understand that when there is a sewer available to you on one road or the other, and the ordinance as it's currently written, and you can, gentlemen can step in anytime you like, that our ordinance now mandates that you would need to not only have the sewer on the one side, but you potentially would have to run the sewer down the second side. The reality of it is that you are using a sewer that's in front of your property, and it benefits you that one time. That is really it should be done. And in my opinion and my review of this, I think it's in all fairness that you should not have to pay for this twice. If there's a special assessment that happens to go down your street after you've hooked up that sewer, I believe under the current ordinance and the way that it's set up, you wouldn't be assessed for that. So there's no benefit, but yet the sewer could still go through to service other neighbors. So right now, we're just trying to define that if you have the sewer in front of you, that you can tap and pay for that sewer and use that sewer availability and not serve any financial harm by having to expand the system further. I believe that's what we're going to do here. And I think I explained that as clear as mud, but that's the best I can do with that. So if anyone has a comment out there, Ken, we'd like to hear. I know we have one homeowner, but again, this particular item does not necessarily affect her.
Yes, we do have the one homeowner, I believe, Ms. Malinowski.
Malinowski.
Yeah, we can go ahead and ask to start your video and unmute you.
Hello,
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
it's Samantha. I'm good. How are you?
I beg your pardon. As you heard, we're trying to remedy something that is of a concern to the township in general, and trying to get through this. And by doing this, this will make your essentially the need for your deferral moot.
Right.
So, well, it's a good thing.
I have a few questions based on the agreement that was attached to the item.
That's the next item.
Okay.
That's the next item. So, any other?
Right now, we're on the ordinance amendment, which is 7A.
Any questions on the ordinance itself?
No, it's really how it impacts me.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, anyone else out there, Ken?
Seeing no one at this time, Mr. Kowal?
Okay. We'll close that end of things. Any other questions, comments from the board members? Okay, Mr. Powell, I'm gonna look for a motion.
All right, let me try a stab at it, and then anyone can chime in to help me. Mr. Supervisor, I move to request the Director of Department of Public Services work directly with the Township Attorney to amend Ordinance Section 38-418 to include a clearly defined interpretation of the right-of-way, defining them as separate but connecting right-of-ways, therefore not to confuse the need to extend the sewer down both right-of-ways. Along with that, I am requesting that the 200-foot rule remain as currently presented in the ordinance, so it can be further evaluated under future study. Also, Mr. Supervisor, I am asking that the Section 38-514 be looked at and amended by the DPS director and the attorney, removing the second sentence that requires a extension down both sides of a corner lot.
Okay, I'll take that in the form of a motion. Mr. Roman, you're muted.
I thought you did a super job on that motion, so I will support it as you stated it, Mr. Powell.
Thank you.
I have support. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Liz Smith? Liz? Andrea Voorhees? Mike Powell?
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Ruggles, I believe, is still absent.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item 7B, consider agreement for deferral of sewer connection requirement 55 Justwood Lane. I believe, Counselor, at this time, this becomes a moot. Am I?
Yes, if you might recall at the last meeting, Mr. Roman indicated after reading the ordinance, he did not feel that a deferral was required because sanitary sewer was not available under the definition of the township ordinance. After further review and reflection with Aaron Potter, we agree that sewer is not available for 55 Justwood Lane, and therefore a deferral agreement is not required.
Very good. Mr.
And
Roman?
that, I'm sorry,
I guess I can put that in the form of a motion that, because sewer is not available to 55 Justwood, my motion would be to consider that deferral agreement a moot point.
I have a motion. Look, Mr. Lilly.
Support.
I have a motion. I have support.
Under discussion?
Discussion, Mr. Powell.
Yes, I would, and I don't think this needs to be in the motion, but I'd very much like then, if this passes, that you as supervisor or the head of DPS contact the health department tomorrow and let the health department know to reissue that permit.
That was my next comment.
Already done.
Can I ask a question on this as well?
And you have to identify yourself.
Samantha Malinowski,
Okay, yeah.
homeowner.
Well, we would need to vote on this first, and I'll entertain your question after we vote, if that's okay. All right.
Unless she wants a change, unless she's suggesting a change.
I think we should hear from the resident, Mr. Supervisor.
Go ahead, Samantha.
What I'm wondering is, in this deferral vote, if this is requiring me through the agreement that was written by the city attorney, would that nullify that, or would that, so it would nullify all those terms that I would have to sign and have notarized? And I could just get my septic field done.
Correct. And that's why we will contact the sanitarian, which I think Mr. Potter has already sent him an email that will.
So I would no longer be I'm getting mixed signals, so that's why I need to clarify.
No, this is.
I would no longer be required to sign this SAD or any agreement.
At this time, correct. Correct. Yep, you're done.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have motion, we have support. Roll call vote, please.
Liz Smith,
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees. Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Roman,
Yes.
Mr. votes yes, Mr. Kowal.
Yes.
Mr. Ruggles is absent.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Rick,
Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment to Ms. Malinowski. Basically, what the board is saying is that the sewer system is not available for your property.
My question was, originally when it was discussed, I discussed it with Aaron Potter. I'm getting some mixed messages in verbal discussions. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to sign an SAD or any agreement pertaining to my property without.
There's no agreement that you would have to sign now.
Good deal. Okay.
As
Thank
far
you.
as sewers.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 7C.
I think Aaron had his hand up, Rick.
I didn't see that. Mr. Potter? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to directly tell Samantha that I will contact you tomorrow, confirm that I have contacted Matt Maynard and, issued them to go ahead and restate the permit.
And can I just say to the board, this process is incredibly stressful when you don't speak your political language. I deal in lung cancer. None of you could step into my arena and understand it. So I'm not trying to clarify for no reason. I just don't know the language you speak. And there is a great financial cost to me. So clearly it's of importance as a single mom.
Yeah.
So this has been a frustrating process.
Ms. Malinowski, what our board basically did was expedite a special board meeting in order to help you and relieve your stress as fast as possible.
Thank you.
So I know that we might not be speaking in as doing our best job in layman's terms, but basically in layman's terms, that's what we did, is we expedited a special board meeting in order to, as quickly as possible, address your issue and serve you as a resident. And then because this ordinance needs so much work, we're amending it in order to serve our residents that need it served right now. And then we're going to go back and dig into the ordinance and fix it once and for all so that we can hopefully avoid undue stress to residents in the future.
Thank you. I
You're
think
welcome.
we would all appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we were able to get that straightened around for you. Okay, next item 7C. Request to approve building elevation amendment to Sprader's consent judgment. As we all know, Mr. Matthew Sprader is doing a total renovation of his pub and has a request to make a minor elevation change. I have personally gone out there and reviewed that. I know a few others have looked at it. If you first took a quick glance at the drawing, you might not even notice the change. So that's why in your package, you were given a drawing that shows just the elevation. It allows egress out of that area. It also allows a nice little cross ventilation, view of the lake, and a few other things, and really doesn't change the overall look and design of the building. Although it was a small change, that there doesn't appear to be any objection from the administrative end as far as the planning department and the building department goes. It was nonetheless part of a consent judgment and therefore had to come back in front of the board just for its approval. So I've looked at it. I frankly don't have any questions. I think it's an enhancement. And by the way, the building looks great. It's come along nicely. It's a big change. I miss the old sway back building, but you know, it's new and it looks good. So any questions at this time from the board members? Okay. Mr. Powell.
Yes, and I was interested in hearing what my colleagues' interpretation would be on this. And I've been a major supporter of this new structure for many, many years. I just want to I just want to state for the record that we have to be really careful not to keep sneaking up on changes with the thought that it's going to be rubber stamped here at the board. And so there gets a point in time when we might start thinking we're being taken advantage of. So I think, quite frankly, the window in this side would be much more important than the window in the other side. So I really agree with the intent here. But it would be nice if he doesn't have to come back to the board for any additional changes.
Yeah, we've had some conversation. Mr. O'Neill, I'm going to let you go from here.
And I know Nick is here and Matt's here somewhere. Yeah, there's Matt. Okay. So the way I understand this proposal, it will also include the removal of the non-conforming post pylon sign in front of the building, which is certainly a benefit from a zoning ordinance aspect. And Matt, you know, jump in here if, and I spoke with Matt today about some of this. You know, Matt does want a sign. It's not unreasonable for him to have a sign. Nick and I took a look at the sign ordinance today, and based on kind of what we arrived at with applying the ordinance to the building that Matt is building out there, the zoning ordinance does allow for a wall sign, you know, in place of this post pylon sign that he's going to remove, which is a good thing as a part of this request. So Mr. Powell, just to answer some of that, he's going to give that up. And then on top of that, the ordinance allows for 5% of the wall area for a non-residential sign in a residential district, which would allow him a 27.5 square foot sign. Matt and I talked about a maximum of a 24 square foot sign, which is slightly smaller than what he'd be allowed by rule. And he has also requested then a smaller sign on the lakeside because he's going to have road traffic and he's going to have boat traffic, which will be on a timer so that when the bar is open, the sign can be interiorly lit. And when the sign's closed, or when the building's closed, the bar is closed, the sign must be off. And we talked about potentially a 12 square foot maximum. It's a much smaller sign. It doesn't need to be a larger sign. It's really more of an indicator for the boating public that that they're open and they can go over there. So that's what Matt and I talked about today. I don't have any objection to this. I think some of this is sort of trading what's there and could stay for what he maybe wants to have that he wouldn't otherwise be, able to have. And, I think it's potentially a win-win. I don't know, I don't want to get too involved in how I feel about this. It's really up to you guys. But Matt, if I've misspoken or mischaracterized anything we discussed today, please let me know. But that's kind of what I understood.
Nope, that's absolutely perfect. And Mike Powell, I don't mean to take advantage of anything.
No, I know that, Matt.
What had happened, Mike, I actually drew these up 13 years ago. Had I drawn them up now, it would be a totally different building.
Yeah.
So, and while building it, we built the floor and we actually noticed we had a lot more space, and that's in the bedroom area. It'd be nice to have a bedroom window towards the lake, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely
And
does.
I truly apologize for even asking, but if, what, I certainly wanted to ask. I didn't want to do it without asking.
Well, man, what the board certainly appreciates the fact that you came forward and the conversations you and I had from the very beginning on this. And I'm glad you and I could work out with the signage. And I believe that pylon sign out of your way will also help with the parking situation a little bit and just make it a little nicer for you. And essentially, it'll allow you to have a little more space there, which is at a premium. And I know that to be true.
Sure. Absolutely. And I do want to really thank the board for everything. You've been great.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
Just one last point. I wanted to make sure that Nick and Sean maybe looked out for this. I've had the blessing of living on a lake, and I wanted to make sure that any spotlights, even residential spotlights that are on the lake side, is controlled very well, because the light from the lake side bounces off the lake and up into the living rooms and bedrooms across the lake. And so I wanted to make sure that you were cognizant of that, Matt.
Absolutely. Yep. If there's any problems at all, turn them off or take them or turn them. So,
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys very much.
Okay. Any other questions from the board this time?
I spoke to Mr. Spencer and Mr. O'Neill, so I did my homework ahead of time. I have all my questions answered, so thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Okay. At this time, I'll make a motion that the board allow the
Lisa has her hand up, Rick.
Yes, Lisa. Of course, Lisa. Go ahead.
I was going to ask your intention from a procedural standpoint, because the consent judgment that was recorded or filed in the court and recorded at the Register of Deeds had a different plan attached. Couple that with Mr. O'Neill's comments that there was some quid pro quo with regard to signage. I don't know if that's something, Sean, that's deviating from the ordinance, or if it's something that should be included in maybe an amendment to the consent judgment in addition to the plan. So just some food for thought. You might want to direct the attorney to prepare an amendment.
My intention.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to approve the architectural change for the dormer and the agreement regarding the signage, and instruct the township attorney to amend or seek to amend such consent judgment to reflect those changes. That is my motion.
Great.
Support. Mr. Rahman?
Support.
Motion, I have support. Roll call vote, please.
Liz Smith,
Yes,
Andrea Voorhees,
unmute.
Andrea,
Yes.
must have lost some video here. Mike Roman,
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Kowal,
Yes.
Mr. Ruggles is absent. We have 6 yes, 1 absent.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, Matthew. Get busy.
Thank you guys so much, and I'd love to see you all at the soft opening. So
Great.
thanks again for everything, and I really appreciate it more than you'll ever know.
Keep us abreast.
Matt, when's the grand opening?
You know what? We don't
When's
even
the
know
ribbon
yet, Mike.
cutting?
With all this stuff going on, we have no idea, but it'll be in a couple months. Thank you guys all so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
You too.
All right, thank
Moving on to 7E, request to approve DLC proposal for Civic Center Development Committee project. This particular project is part of the Civic Center Development Committee's ongoing study into the development, marketing, and handling of how potentially the Township Civic Center area can move forward. Some additional concept drawings, things that we've worked on. Mr. Powell and I have been involved in that. Mr. Lilly, Mr. Roman at one point. Most of us, and there have been some very interesting things for potentially that are moving forward. And we've reached a point where there will be the need to have some conceptual items up and move forward. So Mr. O'Neill, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Well, I think you did a pretty good job of summarizing it.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is that with everything going on with us being closed and then reopened and then not being able to meet in person, we're really overdue for a Civic Center Development Committee meeting. Rick and I spoke just yesterday about the future of the committee, the next steps, and it seems to me that it's a really good idea and a really good time. And I've talked to a couple of you. Kind of about what's going on with the CCDC. It seems like it might be a good idea to have a joint meeting of the Township Board and CCDC. We're really at a point now, just to kind of bring some of you up to speed who are not on the committee. And honestly, it's been months since we've gotten together. I think we had a Zoom meeting in May. So we're at a point now where we're finalizing our draft RFQ that's going to be sent out that Howard Cohn and the Chesapeake Group is assembling. And some of this information in this proposal is kind of helping us frame our concept to share with prospective developers who might want to partner with us. And we're kind of in this chicken or egg situation. It's like, how much planning do we do ahead of finding a dance partner? But if we don't plan a little bit before we find our dance partner, it's tough for us to tell them what we're going to need from a land use or a land area perspective, where we want to be. So we're trying not to get the cart before the horse, and it's difficult. We're all excited about this, and we want to keep moving ahead. And this snag we've all kind of had in our lives over the last few months has sort of maybe complicated the matter, or maybe confused the matter a little bit. But it seems that I would feel a lot more comfortable bringing the board into the fold with the Civic Center Development Committee before we send an RFQ out to 100 developers all over the world saying, hey, come be our partner. I think the Civic Center Development Committee has done an excellent job. They've all shown up. They've all worked hard. They've all been, very thoughtfully engaged in this process. But ultimately, the decision makers are on this screen today. Well, minus one. But, the 7 of you board members are the ones who need to make the decision. And so as much as the CCDC's input and work is extremely valuable and has been to this point and will continue to be, I think we're at a point where we need to stop a little bit, bring everybody into the fold, talk about where we're at, make sure that the board's comfortable with the RFQ before it goes out, and then talk about the next steps so we know what the timeline looks like for both the CCDC and the Township Board. So that's kind of where we're at. This is, we did kind of overshoot the original scope a little bit, and we're kind of, into this, as Mike mentioned in the proposal a little bit, and it was really not because the CCDC intended to overstep. It was just that we're trying to keep this momentum going. And when we're not in a huge rush, we don't want to lose momentum. So I certainly encourage or recommend or request your support on this, as with the CCDC. But I want you to know that probably the week of August 24th, we're looking at doing potentially a CCDC Zoom meeting. And I think it would make sense to try to get a date that works for all 7 board members and just, make it a meeting that we can all attend and have some dialogue on this subject.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Yeah, it's been the intention of the board to have a meeting with the township once we hit a certain edifice, and we're almost there, and it's a good time to get out and get together. The the committee only acts in advisory capacity to the township board. None of its decisions are binding, but it's just a visionary of a lot of people. And I'm very impressed with the committee because, as Sean noted, people have shown up. The members have shown up and really made an effort to be a part of it. And there's been a lot of different ideas and a lot of different directions, but all in all, everyone has the welfare of White Lake in mind, and I feel very comfortable with it. This is another part of the tool that we need for not only our needs, but also to kind of give a potential partner a snapshot of what it is that we need in the direction of which we would like to go, or an idea. So if someone comes in and starts playing the guessing game as well, how do you like this? How do you like that? How do you like this? How do you like that? We will have provided them a snapshot that says, here's what our needs and requirements are. And here may be some conceptual ideas that there's a general feeling of this is maybe the direction we want to go in. Nothing's cast in stone, very preliminary, but nonetheless gives them some direction of what it is and where we want to go. And that's why I'd like to move this forward so we can get to this next level. So any questions from the board members? I can't see everybody either.
Liz has her hand up.
Liz Smith.
Me, Liz.
Liz Smith.
So first of all, I'd like to thank, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
So first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. O'Neill for speaking up and strongly advocating for my position after our conversation that we had today. So thank you, Mr. O'Neill. I think a joint meeting is long overdue. This board has not been updated in any way, shape, or form. There's been zero communication from the Civic Center Committee to this board. This board ultimately monitors the money, and this board is elected to represent the wishes of the residents. So I'm sorely disappointed on the lack of communication, and I'm not comfortable spending $20,000 of taxpayer money without information and meeting first with the Civic Center Committee. So I'd actually like to table this agenda item to our August 16th meeting, request a workshop or joint meeting with the Civic Center Committee so that this board has opportunity to understand what's happening, get shared information, get on the same page. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity for White Lake, and it needs to be done right. And yes, this board is all on the same page. Our goal is the same, but we have communication seriously lacking. And this is too important to have communication lacking. So I'd actually request this is tabled until the 16th, that we can meet, have a proper and appropriate update from the committee, and make an educated decision on behalf of our residents before this board moves forward.
Well, I understand your opinion and I respect that, Liz. This has been a very, very transparent meetings. All the records have been recorded. Everything is available.
So, Mr. Supervisor, I had to track those down. They are not public. I had to track them down today. I had them sent to me. If I didn't ask for Exhibit A on this agenda item, I wouldn't have received it. How am I supposed to know what to ask for if I don't even know it exists? So there's been no communication from the committee to this board.
True statement. That's an untrue statement. And these are very
It's not an untrue statement.
It is.
I have emails to back it up and proof, and it's not an untrue statement.
I'm not going to debate this right now, but I take your point and I hear it and I understand it. So I would like to have any other questions and any comments from any of the other board members. Mr. Powell.
Mike, why don't you go first?
Well, wow, interesting. I have been involved with the committee, but only as a fill-in for Terry. And I guess I'd just like to know a little more about how this proposal differs from the conceptual drawings that have already been done. I know like Rick's got one in his office, a beautiful building, by the way. Yeah, I'd just like to know a little more about, you know, how this is going to differ from what we already have.
Well, it is like that we have were part of an architectural package. That is part of an engineering package. That'll determine the placement of the buildings, the placement of the roads, and the necessary infrastructure around that area to do that. That was never part of the original proposal. When we did our original work, that was all based on conceptual, sort of a larger picture. Now we're taking this down to a macro, where we actually get into an area where the prospective buildings are going to go and how they're going to relate in relationship to an entrance to the park and things of those nature. We had additional survey work done that needed to be done to establish all the grades and elevations, as Mr. Powell will attest to. Without those, you can't build anything. So that was one of the last things that this board passed. And this will be the natural progression in that order to go to the next level, which will allow us to have the placement of these facilities and show them on some sort of imprinted plan that will give the public and give the board that information that they're looking for. So without moving in this step, there isn't a full solid picture that we can give you. This being done will give you more of a generalization as to how and where and how the placement. So this is a natural progression in this project.
Rick, I don't know that if I'm convinced that we're there, and I'll give the board a great example. A couple of weeks ago, I asked Mr. O'Neill if we had planned on putting a dog park somewhere in the new Civic Center area. And the reply that I got back was, later on this year, we're going to try to get more information from the public, on that topic. So, I guess the question is then is if we don't know we're going to even have a dog park, how can we do a concept?
These are two different things. Yeah. I think you're completely what I'm getting at. The park itself will be part of a master plan that Mr. O'Neill is putting together to request an RFQ to go down that road. That would be with those type of amenities. This is more of a mechanical and engineering and physical placement of roads and buildings in relationship to the property, not in relationship to any facility like a dog park or a gazebo or anything like that on the park. This is a completely different section of this. As a matter of fact, this actually doesn't have really anything to do with the park other than how we're going to access the park, which is what part of this does. So there's not to be the two confused, or two different things completely.
Right. But at the same time, the Civic Center, the layout of the Civic Center area, I know we've talked about medical buildings or senior living spots. Are we thinking that's going to be part of this as well, Rick?
This is strictly our facilities, where the public safety building would go, how the road would go in relationship to the public safety building and the proposed site of the new township park. So in other words, it defines our coordinate, our area, our needs that we for the township, so that we can have some sort of a concept that we can present out there, that when other persons are looking at this, and Mr. Lilly mentioned this a long time ago, the township need come first. So we would be doing this to establish what those needs and how it would lay out on the land. And then that would determine what would be left the persons or interests, business interests, to get involved in. So that's why it's so important to get to this level. So
yeah, Rick, and what you've discussed, Rick, what you've described. I hope for 20 grand, we're getting a whole lot of detail.
It will be there. Yeah. Mr. Lufkin, if you care to elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, I can just clarify a little bit that the original contract that this would be an amendment to was specifically to look at the Township Hall building itself with the spatial analysis of what you guys need for that building. And I know we've done some preliminary layouts on that and stuff and looked at what space you'll need. And this amendment is more geared towards taking a step back from that one building and looking at the overall site. How are things going to fit into the property? So I think you're right, Rick. It's two separate things, and that's why we've identified it as a change of scope, because it's not looking at just the Civic Center building now. We're taking a step back to get more of an overall picture of the site and kind of hone in on that, and then get some of the renderings that we've put together, for you guys as part of this as well.
I think one of the concerns, I don't mean to jump in, and one of the concerns has always been, and I think you mentioned it a second ago, Rick, it's something that Terry had been talking about from the beginning. We don't want to sell ourselves short on the space we need, so we kind of have a rough idea of how many square feet we're going to be looking for the new buildings. But we need to know what that footprint's going to look like before we can go and present to a future partner the rest of the property to try to arrive at a concept that we can both get behind and be happy with. And so that's kind of taking that next step. And I was saying, we're trying to figure out which steps to take intentionally, and we don't want to get the cart in front of the horse. And though everyone's kind of eager to get through this, it's just trying to carefully go through this process. So we're taking care of our needs first. We're taking care of the land planning piece of it that addresses those needs, and then knowing kind of roughly what we have to dispose of. And again, and by dispose of, I mean, allow a partner to develop, keeping our goals on the forefront. So I don't know if that's just redundant, but, and it is, I think Ricky said it properly. The whole planning for the park thing is coming down the pike too. And it's a totally separate parcel. The only thing it'll have in common, I guess, is an access, potentially an access drive, but that's also very critical. They're both kind of on a similar path with planning, and we're just trying to get this thing from concept to maybe draft at this point so we can take it to the next step.
Mr. Roman.
Just a comment to Liz. This doesn't set anything in stone, Liz. So I share your concern. I think this is, at this point, more of a concept of the entire layout of the site. But again, nothing's in stone. And I share your concern, before making any final decisions. This board's got to get a lot more information from the committee.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing in my concern. I mean, with all due respect, I just think the board needs to have input and knowledge. And I would make a motion again to table this issue till our August 16th meeting so that we can be properly informed by the committee. I have a motion on the floor.
Before that's seconded, because Robert's rules say if it's seconded, there's no further discussion unless the motion is defeated. If I could chime in here briefly, Liz, just for a minute. I'm going to share Liz's concern that, quite frankly, there's an awfully lot of information that we have out here that can be shared with the board. And we have a number of members of the board that have not seen anything. I think, quite frankly, they would be very excited as to what the committee's come up with and what DLZ has done thus far. I guess my concern is a little bit that I do not believe that DLZ is an expert in development. They are expert planners, expert engineers, but I personally am a little concerned that we might be narrowing down the decisions on placements and architecture and maybe even logistics on site that might want to be totally undone by our eventual future partner. Yes, we need to take care of the township, but I think that it would be great to be able to make a presentation to the board, and then maybe have a potential partner help in the layout that DLZ is proposing. We have a general location where the building's going to be. We have general areas and we have general square footages. I'm a little concerned that the real experts that know how to build, know how to lease, know how to make a profit, they're going to come back and say, you know what, this is totally unacceptable because in order for the private sector to work, you have to change things around. And it'd be really nice to have that arm included in whatever DLZ is doing. So yes, I think what DLZ is proposing here needs to be done, but I'm a little bit wondering whether or not it's premature.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and I appreciate your opinion. Mr. Lilly?
We have a board meeting, I believe, on the 18th, which is not too far away, and I'm going to support Liz's motion to table.
Thank you.
We have motion, we have support.
I wish I could discuss because I don't know when we're going to be able to meet, how it's going to change between now and then.
Support's been made, Mr. Powell.
Yep.
Motion, support, roll call vote.
Liz?
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees? Andrea?
And
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Kowal?
No.
I believe Mr. Ruggles is absent.
Good, motion carries. Okay. Item 7F will be discussion regarding preparedness plan, and essentially this preparedness plan that we have in place is a moving target, and Lisa will tell you it's all over the place. From time to time, things change. And what we're just trying to do is make sure that there is the authorization to keep the plan up to date and up to snuff without having to come back to the board every time. And that would be something that I would like to discuss with Lisa. Lisa, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's a fluid document because, well, for at least for a while there, executive orders were coming out like once a week, and we were having to adjust in order to accommodate some of those concerns. Fortunately, we haven't had a whole bunch come down that changed the preparedness plan, but what we've told all of our communities when it actually got approved is we had the supervisor, city manager, whoever was handling it, to seek the authorization of their board to amend the preparedness plan as new executive orders were released and changes in the CDC guidelines were implemented. That did not happen with this board. And so you've seen the preparedness plan a couple of times now as it's come back with changes. And I think the idea is that everyone kind of understood that this was really a fluid document, and Rick's looking for authorization so it doesn't have to keep coming back to the board.
Any questions from the board? Liz Smith.
So I've spoke to Lisa about this last month when the township opened, and unfortunately the board found out on Facebook first. So I have no problem getting the supervisor the authorization to tweak as it goes forward, as long as the board is kept abreast before the public. So that would be my only request, is that we would be given communication on changes, please.
As we receive information from the governor's office and changes, we will make sure that the board is aware of that.
Thank you.
Any question from the board members? The members?
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to make a motion that the supervisor be allowed to address the fluid preparedness document as necessary, and will keep township board abreast. As a motion, looking for support.
Support, Andrew supports.
Motion and support. Roll call vote, please.
Liz Smith?
Yes.
Andrea Voorhees?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Kowal?
Yes. Thank you, board.
Ruggles is absent.
Motion carried. Item G and FYI, 7:30 this morning, I was informed by the fire chief and a couple of the captains that our oxygen compressor deteriorated and failed. And what this means is that we do not have the ability to fill our oxygen tanks, which are the backpacks our firefighters carry into a fire. I therefore authorize an emergency acquisition for a compressor, and the order has been placed. that will be of a cost of right around $27,000. And as I said in the past, when there is an emergency, of which we really have many, this is the one that's very important because it's the safety and well-being of our firefighters. And I wanted to inform the board to make sure they were informed that it was very transparent that this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, that's all it is. Okay, moving on to item 8. Typically, we don't do trustee comments at special board meetings. I will entertain conversation because it is the agenda. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. And I hope, because of the motion that was made on item 7E, that all the board members make themselves available to the township when Mr. Supervisor asks for a special meeting or a work session. That would be extremely disappointing if we can't have a meeting that people show up for before our next board meeting. So I'm really stressing that. The other issue is I wanted to congratulate all my colleagues that were elected on Tuesday. My heart goes out to knowing that I'm only going to have 3 more months to work with Clerk Lilly. And it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you, Terry, over all these years. And your chair is going to be very hard to fill. That being said, I also want to thank my fellow residents in White Lake Township. It's an honor and a heartfelt thanks and humbling that you've given me another 4 years to represent every resident here in White Lake Township. And I pledge to do my very, very best to fulfill that pledge. So thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you. Thank you. Liz Smith.
So I would ditto Mr. Powell's comments. I again want to thank the residents that so entrusted us and reelected those on Tuesday. It is an honor and a privilege to serve you. This is a good board, and I'm sorry, Terry, that you won't be continuing with us. But I do want to thank the residents for getting out the vote. Your vote matters. So thank you so much for voting on Tuesday and reelecting our trustee team. And Mr. Supervisor, is it possible that that is a workshop so that we're able to have a little bit more discussion on that item instead of a special meeting between now and our 18th, I think is the next one? Yep. I would just request maybe a workshop instead so we can have a little bit further discussion.
That we'll have it. We intend to have a workshop of a sort. We'll sort that out, O'Neill.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Roman.
Terry, I don't say goodbyes because I know you'll be around and you'll be heard, whether we want to hear it or not. So just want to say in regard to this DLZ proposal, Sean, I think what would really be good for this board is if you could ask DLZ to get you an example of what they're going to do for us from another community that they've already done. I think that would be a super help so that the board has a better idea of what we're going to get next.
I'll definitely work with DLZ to help clarify this. And the other thing I'd like to mention, and I don't want to decide for you guys how you handle this, but the board meeting is less than 2 weeks away. And I think that it makes the most sense to me to have you guys sit down in a joint meeting with the Civic Center Development Committee. But I don't know that that's going to happen before your board meeting. I can tell you that it probably won't be impossible to put that all together before your next board meeting. So if it's okay, it would make more sense to me to wait till the week of the 24th. I think that's when Howard Cohn is available and was going to make himself available to meet with the CCDC and, you know, have you guys together for a Zoom meeting because we're not going to be able to do that in person. During that week, if you're okay with it. I mean, it will push this item off of your regular meeting agenda, but as we've discussed, there's a whole lot to get into here. And I'd love for you guys to be able to have a dialogue with the Civic Center Development Committee. And I'm sure they would love to have a dialogue with you. And at that point, we can not only talk about where we're at with some of the stuff in this proposal, but we can talk about the RFQ. It'll be in a packet ahead of the meeting, so you guys can look through and see what work's been done and what's in draft form for consideration, and then make any tweaks that you feel are necessary before we send that out, whenever it is. I mean, we're not in a huge rush, but it's something that the next step is to really get that in the form to send out. So I didn't need to take up so much time here at the end, but I think it would make sense to wait till that last week if we can pull it off then and get all the information to you so we can have a robust session together. And we've been planning on doing it. It was just a matter of timing, and so let's do it now.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Andrea.
I'm gonna kind of repeat what I actually say it this way. I'm just gonna say the same sentiments that Liz and Mike said. But as a reminder, we have a Democratic opponent till November. So yes, we're somewhat guaranteed, but life is not guaranteed. So us trustees still have to bring it on till November. Yes, I agree. It's been a pleasure working with Terry. It will be some fun meetings, and hopefully we can, celebrate Terry in November with a board meeting in person, because that's what he absolutely deserves. And as I always finish off, stay safe, be healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lilly.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I just like my board members to know that I did night of election call Tony and congratulated him. He worked hard for this position. I'm going to reserve a lot of my comments at a time when I'm more rested. Obviously, everybody knows in the township hall this election process is long and difficult, particularly with the amount of absentee ballots. So I'll reserve my other comments so where I'm a little more rested. And
thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Terry, I want to just thank you for the long hours you put in. I understand you didn't finish your job until about 2 a.m. on election night. So thank you very much for all the hard work you and your staff did during the entire election process.
Ditto.
Okay. Thank you, yep. Terry. Okay, now I'll say my piece. Mr. Lilly, I appreciate everything you've done. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I will miss having you chewing my ear sometime when I needed it. So I appreciate all the knowledge that you have and everything you've done, and there's no doubt in my mind about your care of this community. I'd like to thank all the people out there that got out and did their democratic, patriotic, American duty and voted. Maybe more of you need to do that. We are always at a crossroad whenever these things happen, because that means there's change. And sometimes change is good, sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes it's change is the fear of the unknown is also kind of a thing that you never know where this country is going to go in this November election. So with that, I'll say good night, God bless, and God bless White Lake. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
From Andrea, I have support by Liz. Roll call vote, please.
Voice.
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Liz Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Lilly votes yes. Mr. Crowell.
Yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night and be safe.
Thank you.
Good night, guys.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great
Good night,
working with you,
Lisa.
Terry.
He'll be back.
Good night.